over the last few years, that was really that revelation. And as I started to figure that out, I then began to look back at times in my life where I used story and it made a difference. It caused a shift in how people perceived me, or how things happened, or actions that were taken right
Yeah.
after that. And so,
Yeah.
you begin to capture that stuff, and you're saying, okay, wait a minute, there's something here.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. This is Audley Stevenson, back for another edition of hands down the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels, or you can subscribe to us on YouTube by tapping that bell, ding, 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 or checking us out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And that way, you are guaranteed to be connected to all good things audacious related. Now, we're going to talk about the art of storytelling on this edition of the podcast. And while we'll certainly touch on sort of the elements of what makes a story effective, compelling, and memorable, we'll also get into the awesome benefits that storytelling has to ourselves and others when we share our stories. Now, I don't think a lot of people immediately recognize the incredible power that when we share our experience has right away, or realize how impactful it can be, but I promise you it is. And so to help us further the conversation and dig a bit deeper into the topic, we've got Robert Kennedy III with us. He's a communication specialist, he's a speaker and trainer, and he specifically works with people to help them find their personal story and the most effective way to share it with the rest of the world. It really, really is a great chat. Lots of fabulous insights, and Robert does a great job of breaking it down, helping us understand the impactful and wonderful benefits of storytelling. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Robert Kennedy III. Enjoy. Greetings, salutations. Robert, thank you for joining me on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's great to have you here, my friend.
I'm so glad to be here on the Audacious Podcast with Audley. I'm wondering how you came up with that name.
I tell you, it was
hard.
I'll tell you the quick version. I kind of said to myself, I wanted to create something as value, and you'd understand this as well as a speaker, podcast. You want to create something as value. You also want to create something that resonates with you and you can connect with. Okay. And I spent some time doing kind of a deep dive into myself and what mattered to me and what was important to me. And while I was kind of going through that process, I sort of stumbled on the fact that when I look back at sort of all my major accomplishments, my successes, my victories, I demonstrated some form of audaciousness, some level of boldness. I took a risk. I was courageous in some fashion, and everything else after that just kind of fell into place. And so for me, it really ties back to if you're looking to live that best audacious life I oftentimes talk about, it involves that very first step. And so everything else just happened after that. I flowed out of that. So there we go.
Love it, man. Are you in Canada?
I absolutely am. Okay, Toronto, Ontario.
Yeah, I'm hearing it. I lived in Oshawa for about 2 years.
Okay.
And I had family that my grandparents were in Toronto, Willowdale
okay.
for 30 years.
Yep.
So, I told you I grew up in New York, so we were always up there to visit. And
yep.
So yeah, just very familiar with the area.
There you go. I know it well. So let's talk about you and your work, Robert, because I mean, one thing that's clear to me is that your path has kind of been up and down, and it's never straight, right? That path that we
Right.
take to get where it's always up and down at winds, and I truly believe that those winds and those twists and turns that we take, they do serve a purpose, and it
Yeah.
sort of, the sense that I get is that they fed into everything that you're doing right now.
Well, my wife always says this to me. She says nothing is wasted. And so you think that you have these two totally divergent career paths or these two different things that you've done. And when you look back, you really are able to see the common thread in all of this,
Yes.
man. So I mean,
Yes.
from a career perspective, I've been in the mental health field. I've been a radio news host or news anchor. I've been a teacher. I've been a real estate agent. I've been a trainer, technical course developer,
Yep.
and now speaker and still trainer, workshop facilitator, and video storytelling expert is what I call it now these days. But all of that is this really neat package that, especially as I tell stories, I'm able to pull from all of these different little situations and experiences
Absolutely.
in life to make something juicy, man.
Do you find as and we'll certainly get into the storytelling aspect of you because I know it's a big part of your work.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself kind of always looking for that story in situations?
Well, you know what? I think now more intentionally than before.
Yeah.
Before I was just living, man. It was just, you're struggling to get to the next thing, or you're trying to figure out what's the next thing that you need to know or conquer. And now I'm bit more intentional at the end of my day, at the end of my week, in looking, going over the week or reflecting and saying, okay, what were the lessons that I learned? What were the
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that happened this week that I can take away from? So, I mean, for example, like if you're looking at me right now, you see a little scar here, right? You saw,
Okay. Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
a little bit of a black eye. I saw this was about a week and a half ago. I slipped on ice
Okay.
and hit my head
Okay.
on a sidewalk,
Wow.
and I had this big lump
Wow.
right on my
Wow.
head. So my wife, she was in the car when it happened, and she got ice from a restaurant really quickly, put ice on it, got the swelling down. But the next morning I woke up and I
Right.
had this big black eye here, right? Thing is, I was supposed to speak in Orlando 3 days
Mm,
later.
mm,
So I
mm.
had my first experience with concealer. We went to the makeup store.
I love it.
And so she got me some concealer, man. And man, the dude in the store put this concealer on me, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, whoa, that's magic. Right? It's like everything disappeared.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm like, this is a story. And in my speech, so I went through, I was teaching about how to use some specific techniques in virtual classrooms or virtual teaching. And I said at the very end, I got this wipe, and I started to wipe off the concealer like
Oh
right
wow.
on stage,
Oh
right?
wow.
And I said, hey, I tell them the story, and I said, here's the thing. I put concealer on, but even with the concealer, there's some stuff that's still happening underneath. There's still dirt underneath. There's still injury underneath. As a matter of fact, I may have a scar that
Yes.
never ever goes away.
Yes. Yes.
So here's the thing: you're teaching students in a virtual environment, and that may never ever go away.
Right.
So what do you do? Do you maintain until we quote unquote get back to normal?
Right.
I was hoping my eye would get back to normal before I came to speak to y'all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or do we figure out how to move forward authentically and boldly and powerfully in
Yeah.
spite of the situation that we're in?
And so again, so first off, great story, and I think great analogy with respects to sort of the options or choices that we have when we come into these situations, and is it about covering it up or accepting what you have and still proceeding forward? Because that's really what we're talking about here. We're confronted with these two choices all the time in every
Yeah.
situation, and it really comes down to what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it.
Yeah.
And I love that word, choice,
Yeah.
because that's it. A lot of times we feel like we're forced to do certain things, or when somebody says, "Oh, I had no choice," or
Mm.
"That's just the way I am,"
Yeah.
or "That's just the way I'm wired." I'm like, we wake up every day,
Yeah.
and not every choice is easy.
Right.
Not every choice gives you the comfort that you desire.
Yes.
However, they are still choices, and the consequences come with that, or results. I don't even want to say the word consequences, but
Yep.
stuff,
Yep. Yep.
results,
Yep. Yep.
effects
Yep.
happen after every choice, and we just decide which effect or which result or which consequence, if we want to use that word, do we want to embrace.
Yeah. Whenever I hear that, that's just the way I am. It leaves with such a defeatist attitude, if you will.
Yeah,
Like that. It's over, and it's never over, right? There's always that next level, that next step, and it involves some work. There's no question about it. It involves some work. So I'm glad you started touching that and let off with that story. So where I'm curious, I'm gonna have to kind of go back a bit because you've sort of talked about the need to shift and to pivot. Pivot's a big word we've heard over the course of the last year and a half or so because of the pandemic. Pivot, change, shift. What sort of necessitated it for you, and why you had to go from one to the next to the next? What was it?
well,
Just the
I don't know
situation?
in every case that it was a necessity.
Okay.
In some cases it was. In one case I got fired, so
Oh,
so,
that will
so
always do it.
so I had to do the next thing. No, so actually, I'll say two cases. One case, it was that I was given the option to go on a temporary probation
Okay.
or resign. That was one, and
Okay.
so I totally switched fields,
Okay.
going from mental health field into teaching after that. And then there was another case in my teaching career where I got let go. I mean, we moved from Massachusetts to Maryland, and 10
Mm-hmm.
days after we get here, three kids under the age of 5,
Mm.
right? My wife had gotten another job here. I'm working on an online university. 10 days after we make this move, we trek more than 400, almost 500 miles to a new state, new
Yep.
house, new
Wow.
place.
Wow.
10 days after we get here, I lose my job online. And so now I'm a dad, I'm a
Yes.
husband, I'm a man. I gotta figure this out. I gotta figure this thing out. Right.
Right.
I do what
Right.
everybody else does.
Yep.
You go on, you hop on Monster, Indeed, Simply Hired, all of the job sites, start pumping your resume out and seeing if you can get an interview. And I just was not getting any interviews.
Mm.
Now, um, as I look back, I'm a spiritual person. I'm a man of faith, and so I
Mm-hmm.
look at this situation, and I'm kind of like, I wasn't getting in interviews, and that was God saying to me, "Dude, I told you to trust me," because I
Mm.
knew I should have been an entrepreneur from a long time before
Right,
that.
right, 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 right. You just
Yeah,
needed that
I'd started
push.
two companies. I
Sure.
dibbled and dabbled in
Yep.
entrepreneurship while I had the safety net
Yes.
of my teaching gig.
Yep. I get it.
Um, but yeah, I knew that this was a faith move that I should have made or I needed to make quite a bit before that, or at least it was coming. So now this was the time where it was like, dude, put up or shut up.
Yeah.
Um, Decide that you're either going to sit here and complain and whine about why not me or why is nobody
Why
calling
me?
me, or
Yep.
figure it out
Mm.
and make some steps.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's that push, right? We sometimes we need that push to move forward, or need to
Yeah.
be pushed to move
Yeah.
forward, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, I think what happens is, we oftentimes want to kind of be control of everything and control what happens in our lives, and there's some times where we just don't have that control.
Right.
And we've
Right.
just got to respond, and so that's where sometimes the push is not a bad thing, although we didn't ask for it, which is kind of what
Right.
happens. I want for you to identify me, Robert, when you saw or recognized the value in stories, because you certainly, again, you spent a lot of time. We just talked about a little bit, searching out these stories and using those stories to impact and influence and inspire audiences and people that you work with. When did you recognize that? Yeah, stories are valuable.
Eh, I would say I did not intentionally recognize it until a few years ago.
Hmm. That recently. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was only once I started to teach about communication specifically, because I mean I've been a trainer and speaker. I mean I've been officially a speaker for maybe the last 5 or 6 years, but
Okay.
I've been a trainer and teacher for a very long time,
Yep.
right? And so I had always trained on technical things, or I trained on leadership, or something in that regard. And then it was once I began to lean into, okay, how do people connect with each other when they're communicating? How do we really reach this place of alignment so that we can get to a place of agreement when we have communication. And I was starting to look for what that was, and recognizing that the majority of people, especially in corporate settings,
Yep.
the way that they communicate is very task, data, chart, information driven.
Yes.
And they don't always remember that people make decisions, all things being considered, with emotion.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
Right?
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that over the last few years, that was really that revelation. And as I started to figure that out, I then began to look back at times in my life where I used story and it made a difference. It caused a shift in how people perceived me, or how things happened, or actions that were taken right
Yeah.
after that. And so,
Yeah.
you begin to capture that stuff, and you're saying, okay, wait a minute, there's something here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let
Well, the
me share
story.
with others how to do it.
Yeah, well, the stories is what we emotionally connect with, right? We hear them. They might trigger us in some way. They might take us back to a point in our lives that we were, that impacted us greatly, whether positive or negative. And and those are the ones that we remember, right? Someone will get up on stage and they'll speak for an hour, and you may forget everything they say, a year later, but you'll remember that story they told you.
Yep, absolutely.
That's what will resonate with you, and then what falls out of that is a lesson that the story was meant to leave you with.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think why I lean into that as well is as a speaker. Sometimes people ask me about public speaking, and they're like,
Yeah.
Robert, how do you do it so naturally? How do you get on a stage, or how do you not feel totally freaked out and nervous when you get asked to speak about something? I'm like, it's not true that I don't get totally freaked out. It's not that I don't get nervous. I say to some of my clients, our job is not to get rid of the butterflies; it's to help them fly in formation. Right? So, what I tend to do is, I'm like, how do you help them fly in formation? Well, you come up with structures or frameworks so that you can connect the dots while you're on stage or while you're speaking, so that you don't feel like you're just this train rumbling along without a destination.
Right. There's a purpose.
So, for me, storytelling is a piece of that. And what is the framework that I'm using in order to deliver the information in a way that is not only palatable, but clear, concise, compelling, and connective with my audience?
Yeah. We start off sort of talking about boldness and audaciousness and risk taking and courage and all sorts of things, and telling these authentic real life stories is all of those. Like, you have to have those aspects or elements to tell that powerful story, to tell that story that resonates with people, and that sometimes is not an easy thing, is it?
It's not always an easy thing, but it's easier than we think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so here's the deal. There are a lot of different types of stories, and there are a lot of different types of results. I mean, sometimes you want to be able to tell a story just to connect with people. And one of the things that I ask people to reach for in some of their storytelling is empathy, right? So empathy is this thing that we all have a little bit of.
Yes.
Some of us, it's more developed in.
Yes. Agreed.
Right? That emotional
Agreed.
intelligence scale. But we all have it. And here's how I know we all have it, right? If we're standing, you're facing me, and we're talking, and a brick falls on your shoulder,
Yes.
I go, ooh.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm responding
Yes.
to a situation that happened to you, because I know the feeling, not necessarily of a brick, but I know the feeling of something hurting.
That's right.
Right? I know and so empathy is this thing inside of us that is able to capture or feel a feeling that another person feels, or at least remember an experience where you felt a feeling that the other person has felt.
No, similar.
Right?
Yeah.
And so how do we do that? So when we're in stories, we're like, okay, how can I make the audience feel a feeling that I felt, or how can I tap into a feeling that they have felt before?
Right.
So that's one of the things that I've got to consider every time I tell a story. So that's the empathy side, right? So there's another story that I can tell where it's not about a feeling that they felt, but it may be an aspirational story about a place that they want to get to.
Yes.
Right? So if you go on Instagram and you go on a lot of social media sites, influencers tap into this all the time.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, I'm on this plane. I'm
on
in
this
first
beach.
class.
I'm
on
doing
this
this
beach.
life.
Yeah, because people, you're sitting in your cubicle, you're sitting in your spot at home. You're like, oh my gosh, I want to be there.
I want that.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to get there. So there's you got the empathetic, you got the aspirational, and then there's also the inspirational. And speakers, Les Brown, Willie Jolly, Zig Ziglar, they made their money on this, because they're like, it's not just about a place that you want to get to, but what can I light up, or what can I catalyze, or how can I create a spark inside of you so that you can then move. Right? So the aspirational is, I'm going to show you where I am and where you could be.
Yes.
The inspirational is, I'm going to show you how to move to get there.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, there's so many different things that we could go into with regard to storytelling, the purpose of story, the reasons behind story. But the biggest thing for people to know is that, listen, stories ultimately must connect with a desire, a need, or an experience in the listener.
Right. And that's the big one. Like, what it's almost, what are we doing here? Why are we doing what we're doing? So what really, it's that purpose, right? And so when I get up to tell my story, what is my purpose? I got to know what my destination is, and I got to figure out a way that we're all coming along for the ride. And that's really what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I share with a lot of my public speaking students, I think, as you just mentioned, destination, I share a framework with them, and I'm giving this to your listeners for free, y'all. Here we go. Listen up, take notes. Right. So I share this framework with them that I call the E's framework.
Okay.
So the first E is energy. The A is ask. The S is story. And the second E is explain. And I share with them, you deliver it forwards, but you create it backwards. So you start out by thinking about, okay, what's the point that I want to make? What's the thing that I want to explain? What's the thing that I want them to know? Okay, cool. I got that real quick. What's a story that I can tell that brings that point home? What's a story that I can tell that brings that point to life?
Yes.
Then I go back into the ask. Okay, so before I get into story, I want to tap into an experience that people have had. So I ask a question that says, how have you ever experienced this? Or how many people have experienced this? Or what was it like the last time that you, or it doesn't have to be a question. It can be, imagine what it would be like if.
Yeah.
Right. So now you start playing this movie in people's heads. They're flipping through their mental Rolodex and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah. And they're connecting with that experience. And so now you share the story that boom, hits that experience. So that first E is energy. And it's like, okay, what's the energy that I want to create? Do I want them to be reflective? Do I want them to be hyped? So if I know that I need for them to be on fire, then I've got to bring it. I've got to come with it. My question, the thing that comes next, has to bring that out.
Absolutely.
In them. So, if you ever hit real quick on the spot, extemporaneous for to speak or to answer a question or to do something, use that simple ease framework, and that's going to help you really figure out how to deliver this information and then land it in an easy way. Yeah.
I think where and having that framework, and this will slide into another important aspect of public speaking or communication, is confidence. So having that framework, having that ease framework, can certainly help with confidence, because for a lot of people, Robert, that's a deal breaker for them. Like, they're like, I can't do this. I've not done this before. I'm afraid to speak, or whatever whatever their mind has told them that the reason why they can't. But again, developing people's confidence, sort of touch on that, because that's gonna be the big one.
Yeah. So and here's the thing that I need everybody to know. Nike had come up with this phrase decades ago.
Yeah.
Just do it. Right. And here's the thing. A lot of us, we want this switch. We want this secret, and people pay for secret sauce all the time, right?
All the time.
Like, ooh,
all the time.
They're trying to get rich quick. They try, if you only do this, if you spend $97, you're going to do. And people are like, oh yeah, let me spend $97 because tomorrow there's going to be $4 million in my bank account.
That's right. That's right.
that's just not how life really works, right? So the thing is about confidence, my definition of confidence is this.
Okay.
Confidence is repetition with the expectation of success. So confidence doesn't flip a switch. It's not this dude that you met in high school that walked in with the leather jacket with the hair looking like Fonzie. It's not just a look. It's
Yes.
literally, okay, I'm going to do something, even if I do it in a small way,
Yes.
even if I spend 1 minute doing it. And then the next day I spend 2 minutes. And then the next day I spend 5 minutes. And then the next day I spend 10 minutes. It is repeating an action over and over until you get to the point where you are successful at it, or you don't have to think that deeply about it
Right.
anymore.
Right.
So my daughter, she's in college now, but when she was learning to drive,
Okay.
she would get in the car and she would look in the left mirror, and then she would adjust the right mirror, then she would adjust the rear view mirror, and then she would back the car out, and then she'd drive down this, or she'd start to drive, put the car in gear, and press the gas, and she's literally in her mind calculating how hard she needs to press this gas in order to get the car to move towards a certain distance, right? 5, 6, 7 months later, she's taking off down the cul-de-sac, and I'm kind of like, dude, slow down. What's going on? Because now she's repeated the actions so much that she's confident in it. And it starts with little steps. So yeah, having the framework and then just doing it, starting out with little steps. So yeah, speak in front of your mom and them, speak in the shower, record yourself speaking, do something that is going to help you to develop that confidence.
I'm a big fan of sort of capturing or your wins, so to speak, as I call that, right? Because you build up those wins. That also helps with your confidence, because it almost becomes like, yeah, I did this 10 times already. I've done this. I've been down this track. I've been down this road. I've achieved this. Like those are so going to your point of repetition. That's a big part of it, and keeping track of that and reminding yourself. Because sometimes we need those reminders, Robert. We need to be reminded of what our greatness looks like in order for us to achieve that next one, that next milestone or victory or whatever it is we're looking after.
Love it. Love it. Yes, absolutely.
So on the communication, so through your communication company, you help people, you inspire people, you get them to where they need to be. There's a piece of this in the art of communication, I guess I want to call it the art of communication, because some people think there's a big secret to it, right? And how do you be that most effective communicator, and how you get your message across? And for me, I boil it down. Probably for me, and again, it might be vary from person to person. But for me, it starts with listening, right?
Oh, yeah.
Being an effective listener, knowing that when I step in front of a group or I step in a meeting or an audience, I've already heard, where they're from or what they're looking for or what they're after, and that allows me to respond appropriately. I don't know if you guys sort of talk about just the significance of listening.
Man, so listening is huge, and listening is the first place that you get to create connection. So for the people that were listening to this episode, if you note, the first question that I asked Audley was, dude, are you from Canada? Right? Are you from the Toronto area? How was I able to ascertain that? How was I able to know that? Because I'm listening. Right? And not only was I listening to you, but I was listening before to other people who had similar accents, who had similar pronunciations, who had similar intonations, so that I can then make the connection. What does that do? Okay, I listen, I say, hey, are you from here? You respond and say yes, now we've got a connection.
That's it.
Now I'm like, okay, cool. I had some people that were there. Now we start going further down the road.
That's right.
Right? And I'm like, yeah, I know about Young Street. I know about Jane and Finch, right?
Right.
And now we're creating connection. It's like, It's not like we just met. We know each other.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So listening is your first cue or your first tool to create connection.
Mm-hmm. And with teaching students, the focus is, and so and why I go back to listening, because the focus is for individuals or speakers, they want to be like, yes, I got my message, I got to get out, and they're so ultra focused on what they are doing that they miss the opportunity to connect, and I'm sure you see it oftentimes.
All the time. All the time. People have, I mean, they're passionate about it. I know people when I first started out in Toastmasters,
Yeah.
there were people that came into the Toastmasters group because they were like, oh, I want to be a motivational speaker. I want to be a motivational speaker. I want to be a motivational speaker. And they just said, I want to speak. But they also didn't think about their audience and what was it that was effective. And there was this one guy that had been motivational speaking for several years,
Yeah.
and he was like, yeah, I just don't know how to get hired in other places, or people, they're not feeling me, man. They're not vibing with my message. Right. And so I heard him speak
Yeah.
one time,
Yeah.
and he was supposedly speaking to high school students, and I heard him speak, and this dude just sounded so angry. He was like, he thought he was motivating them, but he was
Right.
angry. He was angry, and he was talking about how bad it is, or how dangerous it is out here in them streets. And I'm kind of like, brother, these are semi-affluent
Right.
high
Right.
school students who have
Right.
no idea
Right.
what it is like to live that life. And so they're looking at you like, where'd you
Who's
all
this
get this guy from?
That's right. Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
you've got to be able to listen. You've got to be able to figure out what it is that drives your audience, what they will hear, what is important to them, so that then you can craft a message
Yes.
that that connects with them.
Yeah, gotta get out of your head. Just get
Yeah.
out of your head. It's not about you. Yes, you're the center of attention, but
Yeah.
it's they're looking at what we're taking from you, and they can't take from you if they don't connect you. And it goes right back to that. It goes right back to that connection. If that's not happening, your job is even that much tougher as a speaker, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Making a difference is something I also heard you talk a lot about too, in terms of how you want to make a difference with your audiences, and so I'm just sort of curious, how did that sort of interweave into your work? Considering again the path that you're on and that motivational part of what you do, how do you land on that?
Well, I think one of my beliefs, and I'll go back to the word purpose. A lot of people say that they're trying to find their purpose, and a lot of
Yes.
life coaches make money because people feel lost. They don't know their purpose. And I truly believe that everyone has the same purpose.
Yeah.
And that purpose is to make a difference, to make an impact, to transform the life of at least one person. Now, the way that you do it, the gifts, skills, and tools that you bring to it
Yes.
might be different, but your job, your purpose is to make a difference. Right. And so my goal, my purpose, the way that I do it is by saying to myself a personal mantra that anyone who enters my presence, anyone who I'm blessed to interact with, will never leave the same way that they came in.
Nice.
Right. And so that's the thing for me, man. If you're in my audience, or if you're in an audience that I happen to be blessed to be in front of,
Yep.
then I want you to walk out with a different feeling of hope. I want you to walk out with inspiration. I want you to walk out energized. And even if I didn't say a word, but I just stand and listen to, I just stand and played music and dance for 3 minutes, right? I want you to walk out feeling like, oh my gosh, that Robert dude, he energized me. I'm happy.
Yeah.
I can smile right now. So
Yeah.
whatever it is, change somebody, man. That's my goal.
Well, and I think we all have that at our disposal, right? It's a challenge that we all have, and whether we choose to accept that challenge or not, it's really the onus is on us. But I think we do, right? And again, whether you choose to accept it really comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That was like a Mission Impossible reference.
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. No exploding boxes though. That's what
Yes.
I think. I'd be remiss. I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on the fact that, much like myself, you're a podcaster. Or at least you were a former podcaster. You don't do that no more.
Oh, I still do it. I still have a
Oh,
podcast.
okay,
Yeah, I'm on my 5th podcast. I have the What's My Story podcast.
Yeah,
You can go
okay.
to what'smystorypodcast.live for the audio version, but we do it every Monday live at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. So yeah, this is my 5th podcast. I had my podcast before this was the RK3 show. The one before that was the Leading with Purpose
Right.
podcast, and then the before that 3P Success Sessions, and my very first podcast back in like 2011,
Uh-huh.
recorded on Google Hangouts,
Nice.
was called What Success Looks Like. So yeah, we've been podcasting for a little bit, man.
You know, I think I must have. I think I heard one when you got to the 100th episode, and I think you said this is the last one, but maybe you're
Yeah, that
transitioning to another
yeah, that
one.
was the RK3 show. It was that was the end of the last one, and then yeah, we transitioned from that into the current one, which is the What's My Story podcast, and we just hit episode 40.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
Well, listen, as a podcast myself, I have an appreciation for the work that goes into it. I don't know if people totally understand. Unless you're doing it, you don't totally understand the level of commitment. Like when you get into it, and even like a number like 40. I mean, I just at 100, and I mean, it's a lot.
yeah,
It's no joke, man.
yeah,
It's a labor of love, no doubt about it.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's a labor of love, but there's also a strategic aspect
Sure, sure.
to it, and maybe some people don't really understand that. I mean, my very first podcast, the reason that I started it was so that I could meet people and have conversations with people who were further along the chain than I was, and who I might not be able to just call up and say, "Hey, can I pick your brain for half an hour?" No, you cannot. More, my rate is $1,500 per minute. Right? So getting on my first podcast, I'm not anybody big, but I get people like Chris Brogan and Tom Ziegler on my podcast because we connect and we have conversation, and I ask.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right. We forget how simple that is. You just ask, and
yeah,
you'd be surprised the number of people that say, "Hey, this is
yeah,
great. Why not? Let's do it." So,
yeah,
last point I want to touch on, Robin. This has been great. I really appreciate you spending time. This has been a blast. Again, I love. I mean, I'll go back to the storytelling. That in itself, I think there's so much value in that in terms of what certainly what we want our listeners to walk away with is understanding the significance and the power of storytelling. So I do appreciate that. Appreciate you for that.
yeah,
Something I've heard you also speak on is touch about the significance of inspiring people to have the courage to be able to influence, impact, and inspire
yeah,
other people. I intentionally slowed that down when I said it because I want people to hear it. Those are powerful. So first a powerful mission, but certainly
mhm,
a powerful statement, right? When you can impact, influence, and inspire people, and you sort of
yeah,
talked about when they leave your presence, what they walk away with. That's big, and so I want you to sort of touch on that because that's
yeah.
significant.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we walk through those three words, I mean, impact is, if you think about a collision, right?
Yeah,
An
yeah.
impact means that there is an imprint,
Mm,
right? It's not just that you kind of wave and you walk by. There's touching that takes place. There's an imprint that is left in that situation or on that person's life
yes,
when you have come in contact.
yes,
Influence after that means that there is something, some idea that you have, some solution that you may provide, and you're influencing people to move based on the idea or the product that you have created
yeah,
or have discovered or
yep.
are maybe an ambassador for, whatever it is,
Hmm.
right? So you're making a difference. You're leaving an imprint. You're sharing a resource or sharing a way for people to move, and you're showing them how to do that. And then the inspiration piece of it is, my goodness, life is hard. Life is challenging. You're gonna meet some valleys and some hills. You're gonna have ups, downs, diagonals, upside down, flippity, whatever. And then you've got to figure out a way and figure out how to gather the courage to move
Yes,
forward. So
yes,
inspiration is that word, that statement, that message that says, yes, I know
yeah,
it seems hard right now, but
right.
your current situation is not your final destination. Let's get up and go.
Mm. The courage to tell your story, the courage to use your voice, the courage to stand up and share.
Mhm.
That's powerful, and I think it's a great note to end on. Robert, again, this has been really, really awesome, and for our listeners, if they want to learn more about you, catch up with you, where could we send them?
Man, I'm easy to find. I'm Robert Kennedy 3, the number 3 on all social platforms. You want to get involved or connect with me in my community, you can go to storytellersgrowthlab.com. And as a matter of fact, very shortly, we're having a summit called the Story to Stage Summit. And you can go to storytostagesummit.com to find out more about that.
Story to stage. Wow, that's big.
Yes.
That's big. And again, that kind of goes back in recognizing the power of the story that we have. Whether, and you know what, it's really easy to kind of think, that just happened to me, that didn't matter. But it's not about you and how you feel about your story. It's how you impact other people with it and what they take from it, right?
Absolutely. A friend of mine, I believe her name is Cheryl Wood. I don't know if she's the originator of this, but Cheryl says that you're the star of your story, but your story's not for you.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. And it is. It's powerful. It says a lot and really moves the focus, right? Because it isn't about us. And so, again, we talk about the courage, right? The courage to sort of tell those stories, to recognize it, to see value in it. Those are all important things. And when you can do that effectively, man, you're on to something good. So that's awesome.
That's it.
Awesome. Appreciate this, Robert, for rolling through, hanging on the podcast. All the best, my friend.
Audley, it's been a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Take care. Back we are here on the podcast. And first off, got to give Robert a big shout out and thanks for being here and breaking down the art of storytelling. Such a great conversation, particularly when we got into the idea of overcoming fears. And as Robert put it, we're not getting rid of those butterflies. We're essentially helping them fly in formation. So I really appreciate you for being here and sharing. Robert left us with so much great points. And if there's just one thing that I take from my conversation with him, it would be this. A good story has a profound ability to inspire, motivate, and change lives in ways we never thought imaginable. Whether it be a compelling tale of how we became victors in the face of adversity, or a humorous or funny experience that stood out in our regular day-to-day, stories are powerful. The fact of the matter is that a story only becomes a story when we decide to share our experiences with others. And when we do so, we're unknowingly opening up the best parts of who we are while building a firm connection with others in the process. The power of sharing our experiences and being true to ourselves boosts our confidence. It pushes us to be better people and can leave a lasting impact that's empowering and liberating. And that's all because we decided to share our audacious stories. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com, enter in your email address, and you'll be connected and alerted every time we've got brand new content that comes out. We've reached the end, sadly, of another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast. And as always, I got to give a big shout out to our awesome listeners and our lovers of audaciousness for your tremendous and ongoing support. It's always appreciated, and thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audacious Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.